Gender, Urbanisation and Development in the Commonwealth. The session today is focusing on Caribbean, Canadian, and Pacific experience, and we'll be running a session later in the week on Thursday for our Africa, Asian, and European colleagues. So this workshop is taking place co-hosted by our two CLGF networks, our Commonwealth Women in Local Government Network and our Commonwealth Sustainable Cities Network. And what we're really interested in looking at in this discussion today is the intersection of built environment, city planning, and inclusion, and especially gender inclusion, and looking at the specific challenges faced by women in city and urban space. I am very pleased to be here on behalf of my Secretary General, Ms. Lucy Slack, to welcome you all to this exchange. And this is a first installment in hopefully a series of ongoing pieces of work that we'll be doing around this space. So it is my pleasure to introduce, for her opening remarks, the new chairperson of the Commonwealth Women in Local Government Network, Councillor Frazette Gibson, who has a passion for service in the community and is currently the Chief Councillor for the City of Freeport in Grand Bahamas, Bahamas. Councillor Gibson, over to you for your opening remarks.
With protocol, thank you very much. With protocol established, I bid you all a pleasant afternoon. Thank you so much for an eloquent introduction, very brief but eloquent. I am Frazette Gibson, Chairperson for the Commonwealth for Women in Local Government Network and Chief Councillor for the City of Freeport, Grand Bahama, in the beautiful island nation of the Bahamas. Indeed, it is a great honor to address the vital topic of female gender empowerment within local government, particularly in the context of fostering safer, more accessible and inclusive cities throughout the Commonwealth. In an era where exclusive and equality are at the forefront of global discourse, it is imperative that we recognize the pivotal role that women play in shaping the urban landscape and ensuring its safety and accessibility for all. And this is indeed why the Commonwealth Women in Local Government is an important arena for the interaction and support of women in local government. Across the Commonwealth and nations such as Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, Tanzania, Jamaica, Guyana, and my very own Bahamaland, women constitute a significant portion of the population, yet we often face unique challenges and barriers to full participation in public life. Too often, urban environments are designed without considering the diverse needs and experiences of women, resulting in women oftentimes feeling marginalized. Moreover, women in cities too often face unequal access to work, housing, health, education, and representation in urban governance. This is not only hinders women's ability to fully engage in economic, social, and political activities, but also perpetuates cycles of inequality and exclusion. And it is on this backdrop with a heavy heart I speak of the inefficiencies and ineffectiveness my central government oftentimes display in engaging women in many economic, social, and political happenings. Empowering women globally within local government is essential for addressing these issues and developing the islands of the Bahamas. When women are represented in decision-making processes, their perspectives, experiences, and priorities are more likely to be taken into account, leading to policies and initiatives that better reflect the needs of all community members, regardless of gender. Moreover, female leadership within local government serves as a powerful catalyst for change, inspiring other women and girls to pursue careers in public service and challenging traditional gender roles and stereotypes. By fostering a supportive environment that encourages women to take on leadership roles, we not only enhance the diversity and effectiveness of our local governments, but also contribute to the overall empowerment of women and advancement of gender equality. Additionally, creating safer, more accessible, and inclusive cities requires a multifaceted approach that addresses the intersecting factors that impact women's lives. This includes ensuring adequate street lighting, safe public transportation, accessible infrastructure, and gender-sensitive urban planning and design. It involves tackling issues such as gender-based violence, harassment, and discrimination head-on through targeted policies, services, and awareness campaigns. However, none of these efforts can be successful without the meaningful participation and leadership of women at all levels of government. As we work towards building cities that are safe, accessible, and inclusive for all, let us recommit ourselves to promoting female empowerment within our local governments and ensuring that the voices, needs of women are heard, respected, and prioritized. Together, we can create a brighter and more equitable future for generations to come. I am Frazette Gibson, Chairperson for the Commonwealth for Women in Local Government Network and Chief Counselor for the City of Freeport, Grand Bahama. Together, we will strengthen women's representation and participation in local government decision-making processes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councillor Gibson, for that inspiring overview. As part of our Commonwealth Women in Local Government network, we look to exchange across our wide membership. And today we've been able to bring together a group which reflects both the technical and political insights, as well as a variety of experiences from the Caribbean, Canada, and the Pacific on this issue. I'm very happy to now introduce Ms. Kelley Moore, who is the Secretary General and Trustee of the Commonwealth Association of Planners. Kelley is an executive leader with over 25 years of diverse experience in public, private, and the nonprofit sector. And since 2021, she has been the Secretary General of the Commonwealth Association of Planners. Kelley will give us a bit of an overview from a technical standpoint on the issue around gender in the city. So Kelley, very pleased to hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Claire. And I just want to thank Chairperson Gibson on those amazing opening remarks. It just sets a perfect context for our discussion today. First, I want to also thank CLGF, Commonwealth Local Government Forum, for inviting the Commonwealth Association of Planners to participate in this Gendered Cities webinar. As you heard, I am a registered professional planner. I'm a fellow of the Canadian Institute of Planner, and I've had a variety of roles as a female planner in the profession. So I'm bringing the lived experience to this discussion today. My purpose is to share with you the work that CAP has been doing to advance women in planning and how that intersects with our climate action policy, and how climate action policies can be viewed through a gender perspective. I'll be providing a very high level view of the work we've done and identified needs to be done to support gendered urban development. And in support of the whole context that we've been talking about and what Chairperson Gibson shared. I want you to know that there are a lot of applied and theoretical frameworks supporting gender mainstreaming in urban planning. I'm just going to be speaking from CAP's perspective on some of the international work we have been doing to align the planning profession across the Commonwealth and globally in some of these topics and this specific topic. But there's also through this webinar, I'll put some links into the chat maybe for more detailed work that our Women in Planning co-chair has been advancing for those that want to take a deeper dive into this content. So I'm going to keep it pretty high level. So with that, let's start with the next slide. So who is the Commonwealth Association of Planners? So or otherwise known as CAP. CAP is comprised of 30 national planning organizations representing nearly 48,000 planners We have an assembly, we're a organization of organization with representatives that comprise an assembly and general assembly, as well as a board of trustees. Members operate at all levels of government, the private sector, non-government, and community-based organizations. And I'm sure many of you interact with our members on a daily basis. Member institutes vary in size, circumstance, and geography. For example, some countries like Canada have well-developed planning frameworks that are devolved to provincial and local governments, while others are still working on national planning frameworks like Bangladesh, which is doing so much work to put that into place. So as you can see on the slide, CAP exists to advance the professional planning globally. And for some of our members, the profession is understood and valued. However, through some work we've done through our Commonwealth Sustainable Cities Initiative partnership, of which CLGF is a member, we've gained some incredible but disturbing insights. Many of the countries undergoing some of the most rapid urbanization are also experiencing the most significant impacts of climate change, which we know disproportionately impacts women and children. And these countries have a void of professional planners and other built environment professionals and limited academic capacity to train these professionals. So our organization, that's an example of why our organization exists, and it's to address and coordinate and unify around challenges like that. So next slide, please. So we have a number of networks and partnerships that comprise our Commonwealth lens. So today I'm going to be speaking about the Women in Planning Network and our Women in Planning Manifesto. So you're going to get a deeper dive into that work. But we also have a Young Planners Network, which similarly has partnered through CAP with CLGF and the Commonwealth Association of Architects and Commonwealth Association of Universities around a Young Planners Network for the youth and the sustainable urban youth for Commonwealth Youth for Sustainable Urbanization. So we've got a youth network, and other organizations have youth networks, and then these have coalesced around a Commonwealth network, just really recognizing the importance of youth in our future. So we've got a very active group there. We also have our climate action working group, and I'm going to touch on our climate action policy, which has come since our Women in Planning Manifesto. So I'll touch a little bit on that. And then we also have our East Africa Planning Network, which came out of the last Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting. And then you can see, I've mentioned a couple of times the Commonwealth Sustainable Cities Initiative, which is one of our core partnerships. So and then in addition to that, of course, we have national, international, global networks beyond the Commonwealth, such as the Global Planners Network, Habitat for Professionals Forum, ISOCARP, which is also a planning and regional network. So we're just making sure they're very committed to making sure we're working collaboratively with other institutions. So now I'm going to just jump into some very specific aspects of how planning influences women and in the built environment. So the Commonwealth Women in Planning Network is dedicated to providing an intersectional gender-based lens through which to examine the built environment, to advance the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and to support women working in the profession to ensure inclusiveness and equality as advocated for by the 2030 Agenda, the New Urban Agenda, and the Paris Agreement. In 2018, our members endorsed and signed on to a Women in Planning Manifesto, and it was conceptualized and drafted in conversation with a diverse group of planners and built environment professionals from across the Commonwealth, which included 10 different countries for engagement, but over 30 member organizations endorsing it in 2018. The manifesto serves as the foundation for ongoing international collaboration and as a global call to action to governments, professionals, academics, academic organizations, individuals, and stakeholders to take bold steps to enable all self-identified women and girls to exercise their human rights and realize their full potential in designing and occupying the built environment, thereby helping to create public spaces which support equal access to economic and social opportunity for all genders. So that's an introduction to the manifesto. But as you can see in this slide, we talk about some of the pillars around impact in when women aren't included in the built environment. So we know the opposite. When women are directly engaged in developing policy and are meaningfully included in the decision-making process, both as professionals and as stakeholders, development policies are more effective, inclusive, and sustainable, and community-wide resilience is benefited. It's enhanced, benefiting all members of the community. We have a fundamental role to play as designers and active participants in the built environment. And really, women's participation is essential in advancing the Sustainable Development Goals, the new urban agenda, and international guidelines for urban and territorial planning now and into the future. And then, as you can see, there's a number of negative impacts when we don't engage women in planning. And you can see there's perpetuating inequality in planning and design. You can see inconsistent access to and use of public amenities. So from public transit to childcare services to water, depending on sort of the development status, advancement of the community. So decreasing housing security and access to affordable housing can be limited, which also can impact on work and accessibility work opportunities, limiting physical and social mobility, which I sort of spoke of, but also financial capital for entrepreneurial activities, gender-based violence and vulnerability of women in public spaces, and then as well as workload or burdens resulting from climate change related impacts. So for example, there's been recent flooding in Kenya. Research has shown that women are more directly impacted by inadequate infrastructure. For example, they're often more likely to be at home during these events. They might not have access to vehicles to be able to seek shelter, and a number of other impacts. So we know women and children are more greatly impacted by climate change and those related impacts. So next slide, please. So with respect to the action, for us, it's a gender inclusive cities call to action in the manifesto. So specifically actively pursuing a gender balanced workforce in planning by attracting and retaining female talent in the workplace. So that's recognizing that it's important. Not only do we need to engage the community in the planning process and ensuring there's representation of women, we also need to ensure the planners doing the work or other built environment professionals are female. They're going to bring a lens and an understanding to that work. Capacity building and leadership in support of women in planning and other built environment professionals. And the work really speaks to STEM programs, for example, in terms of science, technology, mathematics, for example. Recognition of gender inclusive planning by professionals, political leaders, and decision makers. And I think that's probably why many of you are here today, is to gain or tool up, some of the resources and that are available, as well as some of the experiences as leaders, to be able to bring at and challenge your planning departments or your engineering departments or your sustainability departments, or however the government is structured. There's a lot of different ways to get to the same outcome, but to bring that inclusivity. And it is something that definitely has to be intentional. And then you can see the next point is around planning education and research. And that's really around understanding how to create more inclusive communities. It certainly it's not a cookie cutter approach. Every community is unique, and their circumstances and geography and governing frameworks are different, so it has to be unique to the community, but having a commitment towards a gender inclusive approach, and then bringing that into education and research institutes, but also the skilling up of existing professionals and decision makers and other leaders and administrators in your organization to understand this lens, which means doing training, organizationally to build that awareness and that confidence and be able to bring this work. And then also a development of toolkits and resources that include gender disaggregated statistical indicators, data measure standards, codes, best practices, legal protections. So just knowing how you're moving the barometer in progressing to be a more gender inclusive community or city or government. And then the other actions around developing toolkits and resources that include culturally sensitive planning frameworks. So, and that's kind of the piece that sort of starts with your umbrella around sort of your challenging your government to commit to this, and then to bring that to gender inclusion, to bring that into your planning frameworks, whether it's at a national level or it's at a local level or some project or everything in between. Again, it's all dependent on your local context. So maybe I will switch to the next slide and just link in now to the to our climate action policy. So there's some resources here that I was going to speak to, and then you can see on the slide around the Sustainable Development Goals. A Sustainable Development Goal number 5 is really about gender equity. And something that I was going to touch on and could have probably warranted another slide here, but I'm just going to speak to it, and that is our climate action policy. Really, I had mentioned a few times that CAP is really committed to advancing, the new urban agenda, the Sustainable Development Goals, both in terms of the women in planning, around youth, around sustainable urbanization, all the pieces that interconnect with that. And one of the policies that we've developed since the Women in Planning Manifesto is around climate action. So there's 5 core objectives to that, and it's around balancing mitigation and adaptation, and just really seeing that urban planners are central to both mitigation, but also designing sustainable cities and human settlements and adaptation with the responsibility of ensuring resilience against climate impacts. And I mentioned earlier that women are often more impacted. The whole community is impacted, but women are more impacted. So really bringing that lens to any climate adaptation and mitigation strategies is important. The second core objective is around addressing the responsibility continuum. So recognizing urban planners, and it's not exclusively, but this is, how our organization is supporting other national planning organizations, many of which work with all of you, to integrate this work into your policy and plans for your communities. So urban planners' roles vary across the responsibility continuum. In developing nations, the focus might be on making existing cities more sustainable, while in developing nations and regions, the emphasis is on building resilient urban infrastructure from the start. And I spoke about the flooding that's been occurring and its disproportionate impact on developing nations, but also on women in both rural and urban settings. Another one is around empowering planners for climate resilience. So just looking at the instrumental role in crafting sustainable cities and human settlements. And as climate challenges grow, it's imperative for planners to be adept in both technical knowledge and leadership skills. And also advancing education and resource integration around staying up to date and evolving research and methodologies. So our policies on these are organized around both CAP as an organization, what we will do, and also how our member organizations will contribute. So whether it's Australia or Sri Lanka or Kenya or Malaysia, these are where these organizations have committed to. So some examples are CAP member organizations will cultivate partnerships with local government, and it is very local government focused. That is often where the greatest impact can be held in terms of the implementation and mitigation. So, but engaging civic societies, Indigenous communities, and local entities to ensure holistic, inclusive climate action. Working with local governments to ensure projects with funding prioritize urban planning strategies that bolster city resilience and facilitate community adaptation, impact, and working with the principles of equity and differentiated responsibility based on their national context, for example. And so I give you that context to kind of show that, you know, there's no kind of beginning, middle, and end to this work. It is integrated, and as we're more awareness around climate change and impact evolves, we need to bring policies that we have developed together with these new policies that local governments are building around climate resilience and adaptation, including looking at gender inclusion in planning in the built environment, whether it's planners or engineers or architects that are doing your development. It's a layering to get a more holistic city that's safe and resilient and inclusive for women and others in your community. So here you can see the reporting that's happening around achieving gender equity. There certainly has been a step back since the pandemic, and which again, we know what had a greater impact on women. So we have to kind of work that much more to pick up the progress that was made. And so I'll pause with that and then just go to the last slide. Okay, sorry, I think I was muted there. Apologies. And with that, I'll just go to the last slide, please. And so I just want to again thank you for the opportunity to tell you a little bit about CAP, about our Women in Planning Network, about our climate action policy, and how we're trying to support the national planning institutes in your countries. And where there aren't national institutes, we also support planners as individuals or regions in these areas. And if there's anything that I can help with to connect you to those resources and opportunities, certainly happy to do so. And you can see that there's some contact information on the screen. And I have one little quick story just before I wrap up, just around how important it is to engage women in these issues, even if it's at sort of the broader framework level that I've been talking about, because I know we're going to get right down into some local examples, like some of the applied work. But our president right now, Ewa Cllr, she's South African, and she's currently head of the University of Technology program at Sydney. But she started with CAP on their Women in Planning working group. So she just volunteered, and but had a passion for the work and wanting to advance the manifesto and the action items there. And then when we formed our climate action working group, she joined that as a co-chair, so co-chair in Women in Planning, then co-chair in the climate action working group, and co-spearheaded the creation of the policy. So sort of progressing the work, and now she was elected CAP's president in November. So, and her term started in January, and she'll be at the session tomorrow. But it does really speak to how important it is to engage women, because it opens up new doors and opportunities, even at that little micro level, to being part of creating the solution that's going to benefit us and the next generation. So I'll pause there and just thank you again.
Thank you so much, Kelley. I think this was a really great overview of how essential planning is to addressing those gender equality issues. I mean, I think we all recognize the role that cities play in making a space inclusive, but we all know that some cities are more inclusive than others. And so while we think about kind of those high level issues around how do we influence the planning process, how do we get more women into planning, I think it's also important for us to hear from our political leaders on how are they working to represent the communities that are coming to them with some of these challenges, and how to move from those issues being highlighted to them to action at council level. So now I would like to bring Councillor Samira Ali as our next speaker. Councillor Ali is the a town and regional councillor from the town of Milton in the region of Halton in Canada and Ontario. And she's been serving her community as an elected official since 2018 and as a community volunteer for many more years. She's passionate about bringing people together and calls herself a bridge builder. So we're going to hear a little bit about some of the bridges that she's been building in her community. Samira, over to you.
Thank you so much for having me today, and thank you for that wonderful introduction, Cllr. I tried to give you something that could sum up what I'm passionate about, and I really, really resonate with the term bridge builder, because I believe in this world right now, which is so divided and so polarized, we all have to be able to be effective, to be able to be productive, have to be a bridge builder of some level. So I hope that that is a phrase that inspires many attending today as well. I first want to thank all of you for being here, for taking the opportunity to see how gendered cities work and what kind of work we're doing here, especially in Canada, North America, to kind of make sure we are providing that inclusive urban planning to our residents. Before I go into the details of what we are doing at our local level, I also wanted to introduce myself in a little bit more detail. Other than a bridge builder, I have a master's degree in international relations and public policy from Karachi, Pakistan. And I know that name was mentioned, that country was mentioned by Councillor Gibson. And it is such a full circle moment for me to be here, of someone Pakistani origin, a Canadian, to be here and to speak about this issue that I know will help build those essential examples that are needed to see how we can locally, in the countries you mentioned, take lead from them. So that is my education. I have a family. I have 4 children. My eldest is 20 years old, and then my youngest is 10 years old. And I'm a very proud, happy mom. And when it comes to my political journey, I got elected in 2018, as Cllr mentioned. But long before that, I was involved in a lot of political campaigns with my local councillor, with my local politicians, and kind of got the knack of it. And I really did notice there was a lack of female representation in every level of government in the area I lived. And it was so apparent in the way decisions were being made on council, at the provincial level, at the federal level. You can just tell when women are not present in the decisions. You can just tell, and I see nodding heads, so you know. And so I was volunteering in my community, and I was asked to put my name forward, which I did, and thankfully I won. One fun fact to know about me is that every time I've run elections, and I've run 4 elections now, it's always been men who are my opponents. So it's always 4 men, 3 men, 2 men. My opponents always tend to be men, and I'm the only female on the ballot, and I find that very, very funny. Now I'm going to give you a little bit of an intro about the town I represent. It's the town of Milton. It is in the region of Halton and the province of Ontario in Canada. Milton is one of the fastest growing municipalities in our region. And, you know, you can even say in the province of Ontario, we have exponential growth, and we are very pro-housing community here. But this also means we have a lot of new immigrants in our community. We have a lot of new families, young families. We are a very young community. Our median age is 41 years old. But we also have a very, very severe, stark divide between Old Milton and New Milton. And the Old Milton, we have a median artery road called Derry Road. North of that road is Old Milton, and south of that road is New Milton. And I'm considered New Milton, even though I've been living here for 10 years. So that's just to give you some perspective. So the New Milton is looks like me. It's immigrant families, young immigrant families coming here because you know it's lovely. We have great escarpment here. We have great greenery here, and everything is planned great. But having said that, it's something that didn't happen overnight. It had to be done in a very conscious way. it had to be done in a very directional way. And our town, and if I'm looking at the consensus data from 2023, overall, we are at a 50-50 split when it comes to the males and the females in the community. But having said that, when it comes to the workforce, you'll be surprised to know that the workforce participation for Milton is the highest female workforce participation in the GTA, which is the Toronto area, which is at 71%. 71% of our workforce is female. And that speaks to the great efforts that have been made by the town and the planning department to make sure that our economic development is female focused and female inclusive. And with that, I can come to a few measures that I've been able to collect from my staff to kind of share what we are actually doing. So I see my good friend, Councillor Kathy from FCM here, waving at you. I mentioned her because FCM is the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, which is an organization that brings together municipalities from all over Canada to advocate for common causes and common issues. And it is also an organization and a lot on increasing female representation, especially among elected officials. And so in 2012, FCM found that less than 1/4 of municipal elected officials were female, 1/4. And so FCM set a target for all municipalities in Canada to have 30%, at least 30% female representation by 2026. And Milton listened. And so when we had elections in 2018, before that we had only one female councillor. And then in 2018, I got elected, so it became two of us. And in 2022, we elected another female councillor. So we now have 3 female councillors in the town of Milton, which is 33% representation. So we are right on track, but of course we could do better. And I say, why 30%? Go for 50 at least, right? So let's hope that next election brings us more female leadership on the table. Other efforts that the town has taken is with employment and recruitment. So within the town staff leadership, which is your senior management, including the CAO, commissioners, and directors, 8 out of 20 leaders are female, which is the 40%. And again, I don't think it's ideal. I think at least 50% is a good start. And I do believe 100% that when it comes to local governments, the change has to, yes, come at the political table, but also from within, right? Young girls should be able to see themselves when they walk into the town hall, be it the council chambers or be it the front desk. And I truly believe in that. And I think that is something I have been pushing for ever since I got elected. And staff were ready with this data for me. They knew Councillor Ali is going to ask for it any minute. So just wanted to share that. Deliberate efforts have been made to include more female leadership. I 100% believe that more female leaders at the upfront is directly equal to better decision making, be it internally, operationally, or on capital matters. In 2021, the town also introduced a hybrid work policy, which permits staff whose roles permit the ability to remotely up to 3 days per week. So they can come in only for 3 days. And this, of course, helps women a lot. A lot of the women have young children. And if they have the flexibility to work remotely, they're able to do better jobs and they're able to go up in the chain and get promoted as well. Because a big issue, and I know Kelley was talking about how when there's a flood, it's the women and the children who get most affected. And the COVID era is in front of all of us. Who got most affected with that? It was women. It was women because women were in many homes getting the lower value paycheck, and they were getting the lower value paycheck. So because of which they were led to leave their job while the husband was it was keeping his job, and they were the one responsible for taking care of the children, maybe perhaps while working, doing the groceries, because all the children were at home doing online learning, and they were most effective. That is a fact that we substantiated through a lot of research here in Canada as well. And also the issue, I mean, I'm going on a tangent here, but the issue of intimate partner violence was exacerbated during the COVID era because, you know, the victims were forced to stay confined with their abusers. Usually in such settings, it is very hard for the victim to speak up for herself. And in the COVID era, she was forced to stay home. She was not able to go out because of the sanctions and the restrictions. And that led to a 3 times increase on intimate partner violence. So definitely all of these natural calamities are definitely affecting women the most, beyond a doubt. And when it comes to community programming, the town hosts a range of recreation and cultural programs, which are explicitly designed to be for the town's female populations and are also culturally appropriate, which is a key I want to point out. Not only our urban planning and our programming has to be female-centered or female-focused, it also should be culturally appropriate and inclusive. A lot of the community where I live is from the Hindu background, it's from the Muslim community, and many of the women would prefer to have women's only covered area for their swimming classes, and we are able to provide that to our residents here in Milton as well. So like I said, we have female only swimming and drop-in sessions. We have female only youth camps. We have Hop On, which is a female only track cycling programming in partnership with Ontario Cycling. We also have female only targeted library service programming, which includes mommy and toddler time, mommy and baby time, etc. Recently, when I got elected in 2018, we made a big push, myself and my other female colleague, to have free menstrual products within our town facilities all over the town. And recently that came into effect. We now have free period products, menstrual products in all of our town's facilities. And I'm going to be honest with you, it's not a big cost. It's not. So if you are a council member and any elected official, or even someone working in an organization, speak to your finance people, ask them to give you some costing. It's literally not a lot. It's just, I don't know, a drop in the bucket of all the millions of dollars we spend on many other things. But this is something which is very doable, and you should definitely push for it wherever you are. So that is something I'm very, very proud that we were able to do. I see that I have 1 minute left, but I have lots to say. But I'm going to try to just wrap it all up really quickly. We also have economic business supports with local organizations where we make sure that all of the local professionals, entrepreneurs, female entrepreneurs are able to connect together through networking events. That is something the town is also providing. The town has an annual International Women's Day celebration. And recently I brought forward a motion to council to declare gender-based violence an epidemic in Milton, Halton, and the province of Ontario. And the reason I did that is because I shared the story of the COVID years. And I work with some local organizations that provide shelter to such women. And I can see from my own eyes how it has reached epidemic levels. And so that motion was passed unanimously. And work is currently being done by the province and the region to make sure we have proper supports available for such women. So that is what I have to share today. And I'm very happy to be here to share my personal experiences with you. I'm also the first Muslim woman to be elected in Milton, the first Muslim woman to be elected in the region of Halton. And it is an absolute honor to represent all women, especially immigrant women, on council. Thank you for the opportunity.
Councillor Ali, thank you so much for sharing with us the experience of your experience in the Council of Milton, and also these great, success stories of increasing the number of women in council, of making sure that both council actions, but also council policies are reflecting that gender inclusive space. And then, thinking about how to ensure that gender inclusion is also culturally sensitive within a multicultural environment. So, colleagues, we've heard from our colleagues at CAP giving us an overview across Commonwealth. We've heard a little bit from the Caribbean. We've heard from Canada. It's time now to go to the Pacific and hear a little bit about what's happening with our Pacific colleagues. And I'm very happy to introduce Margarita Barrow, who is a career diplomat and has served as the permanent representative of Kiribaiti to the United Nations, among many other prominent roles. And most recently has been working closely with CLGF and Kllr, the local government association of Kiribati, on a project focused on sustainable livelihoods and climate stewardship. So Margarita, over to you to tell us about how you've integrated gender inclusion within that project work.
Thank you very much, Claire, and thank you for that very generous introduction. I first like to thank the organizers for the opportunity to be able to be part of this very inspiring webinar, and particularly to share our story from the Pacific. I'll go specifically to the project that we're working on, and we'll share some of the activities that we have done to try and promote more women participation in the project. So the name of the project is Blue Green Sustainable Development Project. It is a project that is a partnership project between two urban local councils in Kiribati, Teinainano Urban Council, or TUC, and Beso Town Council, with CLGF, Cllr, and Kllr, a project that is funded by the government of Germany, and it's a 3-year project. We're about midway through the project implementation right now, and the overall goal of the project is to build resilience of 10 selected local communities against growing challenges from climate change and pandemics such as COVID-19. The 10 communities that the project is working with are selected by the 2 urban councils. And as I mentioned earlier, the project is a 3-year project. The project started early last year, and right from inception, we have worked on the basis of a bottoms-up collaborative approach with the selected communities, an approach that underpins all project activities throughout our work on the project to date. Communities are visited in their villages in the Maniabas. Maniaba is a meeting house, but a little bit more than that, it's an institution in the villages, and a presentation made on the growing challenges of climate change and from pandemics such as COVID-19. The consultation with the communities was a lot like consultation with the already converted. They say, yes, we've experienced that. Yes, we know that. And also, before we visited each of the Maniabas, the meeting houses, we actively encourage the local councillors, the leaders that we're working with within the council, to encourage women to participate in the consultations. The response when we visit the villages is, in a lot of cases, 90% women and 10% men. So I turned to the councillor and I said, thank you, councillor. Thank you for actively encouraging women to participate. And he said, Margarita, this is how our community works. It's mostly women who turn up and who work on these consultations when they visit. So we'd like to think the project has a part in encouraging women's participation, but it seems like it's already happening and that we had nothing to do with it, sadly. Our major issue now is really how to encourage gender balance, how to encourage the men to be more actively involved in the project. As you're all aware, communities in Kiribati are perhaps one of the most vulnerable to climate change and sea level rise, with the islands mostly low-lying coral atolls with an average elevation of no more than 3 meters above sea level and mostly coral sand and soil. What the project has done in the consultation with the people is to work on developing a vulnerability risk assessment, which was easy. As I mentioned before, the people were saying, yes, we know, we've seen that, it's happened, we're affected. Thank you for coming and reinforcing that for us. But in coming up with a vulnerability risk assessment, we then worked with the communities and talked through ways of identifying opportunities and ways of alleviating and addressing these risks. We're now in the process of developing a climate and COVID resilience plan, first for the TUC Council and later for the PESO Council. But it soon became apparent to us in the project that the plethora of vulnerability risks and the necessary response measures was way over and beyond the scope of the Blue-Green Development Project. In the communities, they've identified that one of their most important priorities, and this is in the TUC Urban Council area, is horticulture, home gardening. So home gardening is a priority and a focus. And again, participation of women in home gardening is so much higher than men. And we're working hard to get the men on board and to come and be part of the project. One of the interesting aspects of the projects is that the governance mechanism for the project is proposed to be under the traditional Maniaba system. The traditional Maniaba system is one that is governed by old men who are representatives of their families, their clans, and sit down and talk in the Maniaba and make decisions about the village. It's been held as one of the most successful governance systems in the region, the Pacific region. But a lot of other critics are the first to come up and say, yes, but it is a strictly men organization with no women participation. Yes, it may be true. It's the men who sit alongside each other in front of certain posts within the Maniaba, the structure, the building, meeting building. But the women are there behind their husbands, behind and their views are reflected in the discussions, through discussions the night before or just within the family. So yes, it's a traditionally strictly male decision-making unit in our traditional setting. But there are avenues for women to share their views. Just to give a backdrop to that, there's been a lot of changes. We're known in Kiribati as one of the most male-oriented societies, with land ownership traditionally through the male line in the family. The women is given a plot upon getting married but there's been a lot of changes, and a lot of these changes are not spearheaded from outside, like what we're trying to do for this project, for the Blue-Green Development Project. It's changes that are happening and taking place on the ground because people see the necessity to have the changes. Traditionally, leadership positions in government, and I'm talking about, say, 30 years ago, 20 years ago, were male. The administrative cadre, the most senior cadre in government systems was specifically male. There were no women. Okay? That has changed. The administrative cadre now, more than 50% are women. Secretaries within government ministries, the topmost civil service position in the government ministries, more than 50% are women. The head of the civil service, who is the secretary to cabinet, is a woman. And has been held by a woman over the last 10 years. So there are changes. Within parliament, the president is male. The leader of the opposition is female. So these changes are happening and are taking places. And a word of caution, sometimes we would sometimes come in with good intentions to assist the process of change move forward. I think what is important is for internally driven changes from people who take ownership of the need for the changes to happen, the local people, and for these changes to take place within the cultural context and realities of the countries and the communities that we're talking about. Sometimes we work too hard. It's happening. Let's enable the change, but let's not push and be seen to tick a box and say, yeah, this project helped in facilitating women participation in sustainable development. Thank you, Cllr. That is my presentation. And if there is any, there are any questions, I'll be happy to respond.
Makarita, thank you so much for that enlightening overview of how progress is advancing within the Kiribati context and with the case study of the specific project that we've been working on. And I do think that this is a very key element to recognize, is that progress comes in very different forms, in different places. It's important to recognize those changes and see how in this Commonwealth space, we can share our experiences both to reinforce through examples and good practices, but also to recognize those advances amongst ourselves. And I think, you know, one of the things that we see a lot of within our networks is women who, a little bit like Councillor Ali was speaking of earlier, are the only women on their council. And so often, you know, recognizing those advances can be quite challenging. So this is very much a space where we're looking to celebrate all of those advances. So we will now be opening up for questions and answers to all of our distinguished speakers. But before we do, I would like to go back to our chairperson to launch this question and answer, and launch it with a little bit of a loaded question, a question which hopefully will get her perspectives on what we should be doing within our own Women in Local Government network. But Councillor Gibson, can I ask, from your perspective, after hearing the discussion so far, how do you think that networking and experience sharing through our Commonwealth Women in Local Government network can support more women leaders to address inequalities, both within city and local communities and within the built space? Please, over to you. But you are on mute.
Thank you. Thank you. Can you hear me now? Good. In one word, collaboration, partnership, communication. I think what is working here can also work there once we share our experiences, our stories with each other, and see how better to develop our communities.
Absolutely, Councillor Gibson. Thank you so much. And I think that that collaboration and that exchange is part of why we're here today. And so on that note, I would like to open the floor for questions. I know that Councillor Kenesha Gordon, former Councillor Kenesha Gordon, has put a few questions into the chat, and I would like to invite her maybe to raise some of those here on screen. So please, Kenesha, over to you.
Thank you so much, Cllr. Hello, everyone, and congratulations, Chairperson Gibson.
Thank you.
Okay. So the first question I had was to Kelley, and I wanted to know if we could, if an example could be shared of a successful city planning municipality that have effectively advanced gendered city, and what are a couple lessons that could benefit the piloting of gendered cities in the Caribbean and specifically in rural Canada?
Would you like me to provide my response, Claire? Okay, thank you very much for the question. And I just, for those that find it helpful, I've also put this in the chat. You know, it's actually a bit of a challenging question in the sense that we're still working on advancing this area. So even in Canada, where I'm based, you know, it's just really in the last 5 years, we've seen some momentum in this area. And so what I provided, like, and actually getting these frameworks in place to support you know, gender equity on councils, and even with our parliament federally, when the governing party that's been in, I will say, power for the last 10 years, they put in a requirement around kind of to have balance on at the parliament. So we're sort of at, even though we've known we've needed to move in this direction for a long time, we're now seeing it actually being implemented. So I gave some examples of Canadian cities. I think there's 5, there's Vancouver and Halifax who have these frameworks. And then I gave some examples in my own city where we recently implemented leave for elected representatives who have had children while they're serving as an elected representative. And I mean, that must seem, it's hard to believe that we're still working on that, but that is the reality. And I guess I would say that these kinds of networks and sharing are valuable, like, as I think there's pockets of examples, but the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, if you want to kind of go to our portal and see examples, the link is in there. But I think these kinds of sessions help us to kind of cross-pollinate and learn from each other. But I can't pick one perfect example because I just don't know that exists out there at this time yet.
Thank you so much, Kelley. And I think, Kanisha, you maybe had a question also for Councillor Ali?
Yes, so I was very excited to learn about the increase of women representation in Councillor Ali's municipality. So I wanted to know if there was a direct effort of the municipality or if it was just attributed to community awareness about the significance of having women in council, because I know across the region, you know, different countries have different structure for women in leadership. For example, in Jamaica, where I served, councillors are associated with political parties. In Canada, at the local level, a lot of councillors are not affiliated with political parties. So I wanted to know if there was a direct effort on part of the municipality or if it was just community awareness about the importance of women in leadership.
Thank you so
Councillor
much.
Ali, over to you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Kanisha. You have excellent questions, by the way. I need to give you a shout out. That is great research question. And I really hope you win and next time you run. Because I just heard it mentioned that you're ex-counselor. So anyways, I wanted to give you a shout out on that. I really like your question. I think it is a mix of a lot of things. I did respond to it briefly in the chat. We had recently had an election, not recently, 2 years ago when I was first elected, wherein we had an MPP who was a female member of provincial parliament. And then we also had a member of federal parliament, of female. Both lost their elections, and they were replaced by men, good qualified men, but that also made the situation seem really dire because the only elected official was one council member on town council. Other than that, we had men everywhere. And I think that is what the public saw. And I know that Kelley also mentioned it briefly just now. There was a whole movement from the federal government about equal representation on the parliament. at the parliament, and they were working very hard. They were running on this agenda. The Trudeau government was running on the agenda that we will, for the first time, have a gender parity parliament. And so the whole atmosphere, the mood of the society was towards this. I remember that running in 2018. And I think that played a big part. End of the day, coming back to Kelley's comment in the chat, women have to be encouraged and pushed to run. It takes a long time. All the women here who have run and are elected know that. When I was introducing myself, I was laughing when I read Kelley's comment, because I too said that I was asked to run, because I really wouldn't have run if I had not been asked to run. So that is the way women work, and that is where the change needs to come. We need to provide such accessible services, such accessible opportunities to young females, especially, that they feel it, they don't have to be asked to run, that they just get up and say, I will run, and I will do great. And I think we're getting there, especially in Canada, but I know the countries you mentioned before, that were mentioned before, we have a long way to go. And I really agree with what was said before, that it is all about collaboration. I hope this collaboration we're doing today, something really positive comes out of it. I'm really happy to be an active part and see what I can do to help your organization achieve those goals.
Thank you so much, Councillor Ali. So we also have a comment which has just come out in the chat from Petra Wolf-Bates, who's from Canada as well, talking about the impact of online harassment on the interest and willingness of women to run in local elections. And CLGF has done a little bit of work around this issue, some exchanges around these issues with our membership. And unfortunately, this is really across the board a growing problem for women in local government. Statistically, there is more harassment of women than men online, and a very different kind of harassment when you step into the political sphere. It has been having a very detrimental effect on individual political leaders, as well as the overall representation of women in local government. So it is definitely something that we're looking at as a cross-Commonwealth issue. And if there are other members of our panel who want to come in on this issue, I would encourage you to come in now, but we can absolutely also share some of the work that we've been doing, the research that we've been doing around this issue in the outcomes of the meeting. So colleagues, are there any other questions from the floor? Please don't be shy. We're very happy to hear from you, to continue this exchange, to hear other issues or stories of good practice that you might be wanting to share. I think one thing that we were going to go back to our panel to say is also to ask them if they had any additional stories or good practices that they didn't get a chance to share with us in their first intervention. And if we don't have any other questions coming in from the floor, I don't see any, then what I would maybe do is go back to our panel, and prior to closing the session, what we would really like to do is to hear from each one of our speakers and to hear from them one key recommendation that if they could make that change today, this would be the change that they would make to increase the gender responsiveness of cities in the city and the built environment. So maybe we can start with Kelley and move down our speaker list. Kelley, to put you on the spot, I hope you don't mind. Over to you.
Thanks. I appreciate that. I was just thinking about the comments, just as an aside, around just the harassment, that is happening. And obviously it is very troubling. And I think we need, and it is related because it will affect the health of our democracy in the long term if we don't have legislation and policies, laws that prohibit that, and behavior because you know, if it were happening, you know, face to face, it wouldn't be tolerated. So why is it being tolerated when it's online? It still has the same impact. Fundamentally, it has the same impact, and it undermines all of the good work and all of the good people in the society. So I'd like to see that enacted and resolved. But if I take that aside, I really would like to see, and it's not, you know, in every place is at you know, is where it is at, but it would be, I do think, until we kind of start to, as a whole society, see the value of women being represented in elected positions and in decision-making positions, that there be more policies to support that equity and to make room to share that power and that influence. And there's different ways to do that. There, you know, there could be the you know, where you require balanced distribution. The risk is on merit. People would think that it's token and not earned, you know, so it has to be thoughtfully considered. But you, over and over and over again, we see such talented, competent, capable women who don't get the roles because the society hasn't accepted women to be capable, even though they are capable. So, you know, additional policies and supports, and over, like, organizations like CLGF and FCM and umbrella organizations that can just provide those mechanisms, from the international policy at the UN level to the Commonwealth Secretariat, you know, to your local council rooms. I just don't think we can afford to not be vocal about it. And bring that voice. So if that would be one thing I'd love, is just to see everyone find their way to bring that to requirement to the table, and see that equity happening in governance.
Thank you so much, Kelley. Okay, Councillor Ali, over to you. Your key recommendation. If you could make one change today, what would it be?
Well, Kelley said everything that needed to be said on this, so I have nothing left to say. But yes, I will agree a lot with a lot of things she just mentioned. Top of it being making it safe for women to be able to put their name on the ballot. Making, like Kelley said, it has to start with legislation. It has to be something that is enforced, I believe, because in elections, things get really disgusting. And not only during elections, but even after getting elected, women see a lot of harassment from their colleagues, from residents who are very, very bold behind the screen, like Kelley mentioned, online. I mean, I was talking to a friend just now, and I said, it would be a good week for me if I had not received a threat. And that is the reality of the situation. And if this is the reality of situation in Canada, I cannot even imagine what women in other countries, underdeveloped or developing countries, face, especially elected females. And we are always seen as the low-hanging fruit, the easy target. And the more intersectionality you have, the more of a target you become for people who just cannot stand change, cannot see women leading and doing good things and getting accolades for that. So really, I also feel that a lot of the onus lies on people like myself, elected female officials who are in this seat, fortunate enough to be leading, to be role models, and to be example for young women, to make them feel it doesn't end with me. I'm just someone who just got the door open a little bit of a crack. For me, my job is now to keep that door open, to make sure other female leaders are feeling welcome to follow the footsteps, to come in and do bigger and better things than me, open the door wide open. I was only able to open it a little bit of a crack, and they can just open it wide open. So I believe that is the one change I would make, is that women committing to support other women, women promising that we will be your tribe, and that making sure that young women, different women with different experience are able to bring their complete selves to the table and not having to diminish themselves and stuff themselves in a box. I think that's where good change will come from.
Thank you so much. And it really does feel like we're hitting on many of the themes that the Commonwealth Women in Local Government Network has already worked on. So we have also done work specifically around mentoring and the strength of mentoring, and thinking about kind of what kind of mentoring exists across the variety of countries in the Commonwealth. So that absolutely is something that we also are very much aware of as a key modality to support more women into local government and into decision-making process. So Makorita, if you could make one change today, what would that change be? What would you like to push through? What would your big recommendation be? Over to you.
Thank you, Claire. It's a bit hard to follow in with recommendations with very notable elected councillors who've had experience in that area. But yes, I think the message that was given by Councillor Ali for us women to rally behind each other, because in a lot of instances, our worst enemies are ourselves, our own gender. How do we work together, collaborate to ensure that the process of change that is already taking place is fast-tracked? And perhaps the role of development partners in strengthening that mentoring and that the catalyzing of that the strength of the voice of women. Just first to encourage each other to step up and be part of the electoral process. A lot of women can do the job, but are not doing that because they're busy doing what they're best at, which is running homes and ensuring healthy families and the multitude and plethora of other activities that they're doing. So let's encourage each other and encourage more women to step up and be part of the political process. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Makorita. And I think it is important to make that reminder that, you know, there are actors that are already doing a lot. There's people and actors with funds to bring attention to specific issues, and that we should not be letting those kind of homegrown solutions get lost under those priorities that are maybe coming from outside and elsewhere, and that work in partnership is key. And maybe just also to reflect on the comments that have just come into the chat, which is thinking about gendered cities and thinking of the totality of gender in our cities. So thinking about the intersectionality of people across the board, but also thinking about girls, boys, and the different realities, the different lived realities of all people experiencing the city. Councillor Gibson, we come to you as our chairperson for your final recommendation. Please, over to you before we let Janine just do a final wrap up for us.
Well, it's amazing to share this experience with everybody here. And when we talk about gender equality, I want us to focus on all genders and not just females, because I believe that all are attacked in some form or fashion. And so we want to just leave a good example to our younger generations so that it is passed down. I think policy making is important too, in terms of, and I look at it as bullying. When women are attacked, even some men are attacked, just despite whatever preference they would prefer. And so I think we have to be each other's keeper, brother's keeper, so that we can get through this together. And there's not much more to add to what has already been said, and I support everything that has been said. I want to thank everybody. I look forward to our next meeting, of course, and thank you for having me. On to Janine. Thank you, Claire.
Janine, over to you for our conclusion.
Wonderful. I think this has been a really very useful conversation. I'm very glad that it's been so spirited and that we've had that level of engagement with the audience. Thank you so much for your participation and really what we really wanted to achieve with this seminar and a series of activities that we're doing is we really wanted to increase the awareness and the understanding of gendered urban challenges and some of the opportunities that exist among the local government members in our membership. We really wanted to try and find ways to enhance your capacity to be able to integrate some of the gender perspectives into the urban planning and also into some of the decision-making processes that you have in your own localities. And we also wanted to make sure that we could find a way to strengthen the collaboration and ways to share our knowledge with our networks, with and amongst our networks around the Commonwealth, as we look to try and advance gender equality in our cities. I think we have gone and we've started a very good conversation along those lines. We haven't fully achieved it as yet, but we have gotten the ball rolling, and all of your engagement today has definitely spoken to some elements of those key outcomes that we sought to achieve. Thank you. I really want to say thank you to all our panelists. Chief Councillor Frazette Gibson, our new chairperson of the Commonwealth Women in Local Government Network. Thank you for your thoughts and your feedback and your enthusiasm. We're so excited going forward for this year, so much more to achieve. Ms. Kelley Moore, thank you, the Secretary General of the Commonwealth Association of Planners. Very insightful in giving that planning perspective. Councillor Samira Ali, Regional Councillor from Milton, Ontario. And of course, on the other side of the world, the Pacific, our local government consultant, Ms. Margarita Barra. Thank you so much, ladies. Next time, we should also have a gentleman involved so that we get that gender balance, because men also advocate for our gender equality within all of our associations. And of course, most importantly here, I really want to thank you, the audience, for your active participation and for being involved and taking the time out for this session. So this was one of 2 online webinars on gendered cities, just so that you are aware. We have another one that is planned for the 16th of May at 8 a.m. UTC, and that one is scheduled to kind of cater for the African, Asian, and the European regions in the Commonwealth. So the time is associated with that. For that session, just so you get a heads up, we have speakers lined up. We have another presentation from Professor Ua Cllr, who's the president of the Commonwealth Association of Planners from Australia. We have the mayor of the city of Lusaka in Zambia, Honorable Chilando Chitalanga. And we also will have a presentation from someone in Nepal, Ms. Neelam Danushi, who is a program management specialist with Cities Alliance in Nepal, to share a program that they are doing. So you're all welcome again to register for that webinar and to attend and to get different perspectives from those parts of the region as well. Also, following that session, we will also be having an upcoming session in Sri Lanka, which is the Commonwealth Women in Local Government Network meeting for Asia. That's scheduled to happen in June in Sri Lanka, where in that program, we will also include a segment on gendered cities. So the work from all of these different sessions will feed into our collective work to develop a gender charter for gender equality. And that is something that will kind of speak to some of the priorities and some of the strategies that you have spoken to here, and that will come from other sessions as we engage further with you to address the intersection of gender, urbanization, and development. There will be, as part of that charter, you will get a lot more on that as we go through the process, of course. I'm not going to go into detail because I know it's the late afternoon for some and you're ready to go. But it will kind of focus on areas where local government can have an impact. And by ensuring better opportunities for women, better access to entitlements, resources, services, those sorts of things. And it will support the efforts of our member institutions of the Commonwealth Women in Local Government Network. It will support your partners, your local partners, and it will support the local governments in general to empower women and promote gender equality. So with that, just another quick thing so you're aware of it. I know Kelley mentioned data, and data is is very important to us. So just to remind you all that CLGF did publish newer data on the percentages of women councillors in local government for the countries across the Commonwealth. We encourage you to check it out, know your stats, and check your progress against the other countries in the Commonwealth. And please use the statistics that you have to advocate for more women's inclusion. I will send a link to that to all the registrants as well, so that you're able to check it. It's on our Commonwealth Local Government Forum website, and I will send it again. So with all of that, we want to say thank you again for your participation, for feeding into transforming the work that we're doing and the work that you are doing across the networks. And we will definitely share the recording to all registered participants. I don't know if anyone has anything else to say, but I'm thinking at this point, we will be closing off the webinar. Thank you so much, everyone, for your engagement.